Hi, I'm Megan, and this is Greenwood Grown. Welcome. In my last video, I showed you how I stored my herbs and prepared them for storage. And as a result of that, I have empty drying baskets. And in this video, I want to focus on the herb garden, and it needs some work. So let's make a video about it. So first off, I have my drying baskets and a couple of harvest baskets ready to harvest into. And I also have a bucket for just dried dead plant material, a jar of water for cuttings, and my pruners. Let's go ahead and just start with the anise hyssop. So I mostly grow, let me get out of the sun there, anise hyssop for the flowers, but I do like to dry a few of the leaves for tea. So ideally you harvest, this is one of the herbs that you harvest before it flowers, and I do have some branches here that haven't flowered. And then I also just want to clean up the dead parts of this, just take out the sticks. The last thing I'm going to do with this is collect any seeds that are ready, which are also used as a spice or can be used in tea. And then I'm going to take some cuttings to propagate this because I would like to try this in my flower bread of frustration. I think it might do well there, and I would definitely not mind having more anise hyssop. All right, and there's that. I've cleaned up the dried and dead plant material, and the seeds are not quite ready to harvest. Let's see, let's see if you can see that. They're still green and not ready to harvest yet, so we're gonna leave those. I harvested a little bit, as much as I'll probably use, and then I'm going to take a couple of cuttings to put in rooting hormone to see if I can get a couple of more plants of this started. Next, I'm going to move over to these two lavenders. This is a spike lavender. I don't use it for any culinary purposes, but I do like to put it in like bath teas or potpourri, which I don't usually use, but sometimes as a gift, or in like Epsom salts for baths. So I am going to harvest the flowers, which are dried and spent. And then this lavender over here, which is a true lavender, I'm going to take out this damaged part that was caused by our late snow. So spike lavender doesn't have a lot of medicinal benefits, but it smells amazing. It has that really clean, fresh lavender scent. It's a pleasure to harvest it. And there are those two plants cleaned up and looking a lot better. This true lavender that just had the dead foliage in it just looks so much better having pruned it out. That'll give it some more room to grow and fill in without the dead foliage competing for space. We're going to move around here to this sage plant. This is the oldest sage in my garden. She has been here, I think, for 6 or 7 years. One of the first two plants that I planted along with the rosemary that's right here. And she has bloomed and needs to have her dead flowers taken out. Other than that, she's looking very healthy. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, and that sage is looking a lot better. I pruned out her dead flowers and any dead foliage. And then I also cleaned up the patio right here in front. Sage flowers can be quite messy. At which, if you're growing over dirt, that's great. They just add to the health of the soil and add to, act as a little bit of a mulch. but on my patio they're not needed. So I just sweeped up in front of her and cleaned up a little bit. I also harvested a small amount of sage for culinary purposes. I do use sage. It's a very strong herb, so you don't need a lot of it. So I don't harvest a lot of it. I do also use it in making incense, but I usually use what I didn't use from the year before in making my incense. Sage holds on to its scent really well, and that's how I recycle my sage from one year to the next. I harvested from these newer leaves. That's what you want to harvest from. The lower ones down here where the flowers were, those are not what you want to harvest. Okay, and just moving around the circle, the rosemary, the grand queen of the herb garden, is in need of some trimming. So I do have to heavily prune this rosemary to keep it from becoming a giant bush. So I'm gonna do that, and I dry that. I do use it for culinary purposes, and then I also use it to make all sorts of bath teas, incense, salts, vinegars, all sorts of things. We use a lot of rosemary, and then I also feed branches of it to my chickens to help with their health. All right, and there she is, all pruned up. It may not look like I did a lot, but I want to show you, I actually, now there are cypress boughs underneath there, but all this top stuff are large rosemary branches, plus all of this. So I pruned a ton. She's just a very full, lovely, happy plant. So I've thrown that extra rosemary in with the chickens, and they won't eat it like they do garden scraps, but they will pick at it and eat little bits of it, and it helps with any pest pressures that they're feeling. You can see a few of them sampling it there. I realized that I skipped over my 2 lemongrass plants. Those are the 2 in these pots right here, and that's because we're not going to do anything to them. So last year I split my lemongrass plant to harvest the shoots, which are the edible parts. The leaves are used for tea, but the bottom parts are what you eat like in Thai food, down these shoots. So I harvested some of those, quite a few of them. It was originally in, I think, this orange pot, but if not that pot, something similar in size. And I kept 5 of the shoots to propagate, and 2 of them lived, 1 in each pot. And so I'm letting it be so that it can regenerate itself and just get to be a bigger, healthier plant. And hopefully I'll have a lot more lemongrass. This needs to overwinter in my greenhouse. So it does, there is some limiting factor to how much I can grow there. But yeah, we're not going to do anything to this. I can harvest the leaves, but I don't need any right now. I still have quite a bit left from last year. And I just tasted it to make sure that it still had good flavor, and it does. So we're leaving the lemongrass alone. Okay, moving around the circle, we have this young sage. This sage is only, I believe, a year old. This might be its 3rd year, but I propagated from the other sage when a large branch of that sage got broken off. So I've already removed her flowers earlier in the year, and I'm just gonna, and you can see them, I just leave them down here to break down into this soil. The soil in my herb garden was gravel. It was a gravel driveway. We dug it out, we replaced it with wood chips and let them break down for a year, and then we planted directly into it. These types of herbs mostly don't mind, really. They like well-draining soil. They're Mediterranean herbs, but not always, as you can see by our next plant. But I'm going to go ahead and just clean up this sage a little bit, and then we're going to move on to this lavender, which I am nursing along. She's not looking great. She was heavily damaged in our April snow, but she did live, and so I've cut out a lot of the dead foliage. I'm just going to take a look and see if anything else can be done to help her, or whether we just need to keep nursing her along and hope that she comes back better next year. The mint patch is next, and I just went ahead and did the few things that need to be done. I may prune it up a little bit, but I have harvested, dried, and processed all the mint that I need for the year, and so I am letting it go to flower. The bees particularly love mint flowers, so when this pops into flower, you can see it's just, some of them are just beginning to come into flower. This will just be covered in bees. So we like to give that to them after we've harvested what we need. Okay, next up we have the stevia, and it's looking a little droopy right now because I forgot to water it yesterday, but I watered it now. But I'm also going to give it a little help by harvesting it so it doesn't have as much plant matter to get water to. And there is the stevia harvested down there. And I did pull the plant out because she's looking a little leggy, and so I think she's stretching for sun. This spot is in shade right now. It's I don't know, about 10 o'clock in the morning, and but it's in sun most of the day. I just thought that the cypress tree might be shading her out a little bit as it grew, so I moved her over just about a foot and a half, give her a little bit more sun, little less shade from the cypress tree. Okay, next we're going to move on to one of my 2 holy basil containers, and we're going to harvest that. While I was harvesting the tulsi, the holy basil, I thought I'd walk over and harvest the other one that lives over in my vegetable garden so that they're harvested together. And I noticed something interesting about the plant. Now these 2, there's actually multiple plants, but they're growing in 2 different places in 2 different spots. This one gets more sun, and I wanted to show you the difference in the foliage. Hopefully you'll be able to see it on camera. This is the one harvested from the more sunnier area, and this is the one harvested from the more protected area. And they are totally different colors, even though this is a much darker green, and the leaves are a little bit, more tender, which is odd because in this color over here looks more tender, but actually the leaves are a little bit stiffer. So that's just an interesting thing that I noticed, that same plant from the same seed packet, but different growing conditions give you different results. Okay, next we have this wild mess of oregano and lemon balm. I've had people ask me how I keep my lemon balm and oregano in control, and how I mostly keep them in control is, well, one, partially I don't mind if they spread a little bit. On this side they would get string trimmed, and on the other side that's not great growing conditions for either of them, so they don't tend to want to go there. But also I don't like to let them flower. So these are starting to flower, and I'm going to go ahead and prune them so that they don't spread their seed. All right, that's done. I ended up, the lemon balm looked really leggy and just not great. I've already harvested all the lemon balm I need for the year. If I do need more, I have another small patch of lemon balm that I can harvest from, but it just didn't look great. So I ended up taking the string trimmer to it and cutting it down to nothing, and then adding a layer of compost on top of it to give it some more nutrition. It'll grow back. It'll probably grow back this year, and if I need more, then it will be there ready for me. There was an orange pot here that had been growing fenugreek. It was kind of a failed experiment, and I got rid of that. So next we're going to move over into this part of the herb garden, where I'm going to be doing some cleanup and some harvesting. So first up, I'm going to deal with this poor feverfew. This is the main manifold to most of our watering system, and when I put in the drip that runs around, or the irrigation line that runs around the entire property, this is where it gets its water source from, and it kind of impeded on the feverfew, and I thought that it would just grow over it, but it kind of hasn't. So I'm going to see what I can do about that and also get that invading blackberry vine out of there. Okay, I decided to not do much to the feverfew. I tied it up. Hopefully you can see that. I know the lighting's kind of wonky right here. And staked it just so that it would grow more upright. I would like it to go to seed because I would like to grow a lot more feverfew. And so I want to gather the seeds. So I just kind of left it alone to dry out, but just tied it up so it's not falling over. And then next I'm gonna deadhead this lavender, at least some. There's a lot to do. I haven't done it. And then prune it up a little bit in some places like over here where it's coming out into the regular bed. All right, yesterday it got too hot and I went inside and then finished up after dark. Well, I didn't finish up, but finished up the lavender after dark. Remember to deadhead your lavender, not all at once. It took about an hour just to deadhead these 4 lavender plants, and I missed some, but that's okay. Hopefully we'll get, that will prompt them to put in a new flush of flowers, and I'll give them a blooming fertilizer as well. So now I have cleaned up the oregano that's in that main part, and I'm starting on harvesting time. I also went to make pork last night and realized I had no dried sage. So I'm gonna harvest a little bit more sage than the little bit that I harvested yesterday from my purple sage plant in this bed. So there, I've started harvesting thyme, and then I'm also gonna harvest, I'm gonna harvest some more thyme. I'm gonna fill up that basket. And then I'm gonna also harvest some tarragon and some savory. So the tarragon is this plant over here. I'm gonna harvest some purple sage and then some savory from right here. And then this is my main thyme plant. It has already bloomed, and the dead thing looking stuff on top are the blooms. I can still harvest from that. It just takes a little bit more cleanup or garbling, if you will, when I harvest from that. So I'm still harvesting there. Its blooms are just spent. This one down here, I have a couple of different varieties of thyme. This one right now is in bloom. They're so pretty when they're in bloom. So, and I just mix my different types of thyme together when I dry them. I just think that that's nice. It gives them a nice flavor. All right, I finished up in the main herb garden, and I just have the few things that are in the vegetable garden left. That is where my calendula is growing right now, and I'm gonna harvest some more of that. And then the Roman chamomile, the German chamomile. And I've run out of space in my drying baskets. I don't have, everything is filled up. So I'm gonna hold off harvesting basil to dry, but I will be harvesting basil to make pesto. Here's the calendula, and we're gonna pull the flowers that are open, and they should be sticky off. So we're looking for flowers like this and not so much like this, and then certainly not the ones that have gone to seed. Okay, and now we're over here with the German chamomile. Those are the little white and yellow flowers. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that I made a reel about both this and the calendula. Not Roman, this is German chamomile. We do have Roman chamomile, but it's a new plant. Roman chamomile is a perennial. German chamomile is a self-seeding annual. And so I take it wherever it pops up. This is where it happened to come up this year. So I'm going to harvest all these flowers, and I need to do this about every 2 days. Okay, we have the chamomile harvested, and while I'm there, I usually harvest whatever beans are ready. I throw them in my fridge, and then when we have enough for dinner, that's what we have for dinner. And the last thing we're gonna do is harvest basil. And I have basil growing throughout my garden, but there's culinary basil. This is just Genoese basil or sweet basil. And I'm gonna harvest it to make pesto, which I will freeze. All right, and there is enough basil for a batch of pesto. And I also ended up harvesting some cinnamon basil to make tea with, and I'm gonna make this fresh. I will post a reel about that on Instagram. All right, and other than the rosemary, here's everything I harvested, put into what it's going to go in. I don't have a basket right now for the German chamomile, but it will dry just fine in there. It just dries very quickly. We have the regular basil, the cinnamon basil, the thyme, calendula, tulsi, stevia, sage, the bit of oregano that I harvested, which is almost dry. Oregano dries pretty quickly too, but when it does dry, then I'll move some of the tarragon into that basket. The tarragon's looking a little crowded. Oh, that's not tarragon. That's savory, and that's tarragon. I was like, I thought I harvested a lot more tarragon than that. I did. It's in that basket, and then I've moved the lavender into one of these bags. These are produce bags that you get like at the grocery store, and I use them to wild harvest in if I'm out wild harvesting, but also for certain things they work great for, like these lavender flowers were almost all the way dry when I harvested them, and they'll finish drying in there, and then they'll be collected because lavender flowers fall off as they dry. They make a giant mess. If you've never hung a bunch of lavender, well, let me just warn you. So it's good to keep them contained. And then I also have the rosemary outside on the drying table because it's way too much to come in. So that's outside, and I think that's all that's outside, yeah. So a comment about the harvest and what this looks like. There's a lot of herbs, but it doesn't look like very much. I ended up pulling 2 5-gallon buckets of weeds and just other plant material like that I was cutting off. And this was a big job. It took about 5 or 6 hours, and that's just what's good for the plants too. So the plants will be happier and healthy, even if I didn't. It doesn't look like I spent 5 hours harvesting herbs. I love growing herbs. It's a pleasure to work in my garden. It's so nice to work with things like everything you go to smells good. Anyway, if you have any questions about growing your herbs or harvesting them, if you have a suggestion for an herb that I didn't talk about that I need in my garden, let me know. I'm always looking to add new herbs to my herb garden, and I will talk to you later.